we thought it might be good just to get some sense of the audience so we know how to direct comments, and Andrew knows a little better what the audience is. So can I ask for a show of hands in several categories? First, how many MBA 1s, first year MBAs? Okay, big majority. MBA 2s? And engineers from outside of the school, okay, so a smattering. Alumni, it's reunions weekend, okay, a couple of, and then the remainder maybe anybody from the D school, design here, 1 or 2? Good, okay, so you have a sense. Good. Mostly.
Anyone from the class of 47? I heard that they're doing a reunion, no?
That will be later. So the other piece of housekeeping is that Andrew obviously is CEO of a public company, and that shouldn't stop us from having a robust and full discussion, but a couple of things that public company CEOs have to be careful when in a public disclosure form. So if we get close to the edges on that, we'll deal with it. I don't think it'll stop us from having a robust discussion. Maybe a good place to start, picking up on the introduction, before Groupon was Groupon, it was The Point, and you had a number of great ideas in The Point, this concept that a deal wouldn't transact until a critical mass of the parties agreed. Same concept you carried over to Groupon. But a lot of our students go off and start companies of their own, and you know, they don't always get it right with plan A, plan B, plan C, and so forth down the line. But maybe you could talk a little bit when you were first founding The Point and you saw things weren't going so well. How did you come to pivot to the ideas that became Groupon? What was that process like? What were the learnings there? What would be good for our students to know about that?
Well, when people look at Groupon today, I don't know how many people have come up to me and said, "Oh, I had that idea." You know, it's ridiculously simple, right? We find great local businesses and we offer them for sale on the internet at 50% off, right? It's not really that genius of an idea. But it wasn't obvious at all at the time. It wasn't obvious that consumers would be interested in getting a daily deal on something like this. It wasn't obvious that merchants would see value. You know, we didn't anticipate that 6 months after we launched in Chicago, we would have a 6-month waiting list of businesses to get signed up. So I think that's an important thing to remember, is that the ideas that are successful aren't always obvious at the time. When we started with, let me talk about some of the lessons, maybe.
That would be great.
Looking back in retrospect of things that might have helped us find the promised land a little bit faster if I had known these things. So The Point was this big, massive, abstract idea to solve all the world's collective action problems. It was get a critical mass of people who all want to either take some collective action or give money towards something. And it could be anything from organizing the guys in your dorm to buy a ping pong table together, kind of like the Kickstarter model, to organizing a boycott against a multinational corporation. And it was such a big abstract idea that it wasn't something that was easy for people to understand. It took 5-10 minutes of explaining before they'd say, "Oh, I get how that could be really cool." So I think that the things that tend to be successful are things that are one baby step removed from something that people already understand very well, and they can grok within 5 seconds of looking at it. And that's what that's what Groupon was, right? It wasn't very difficult to explain the concept or how the value applies to them. The other thing is I tended to gloss over the massive chicken and egg problem that The Point had. In other words, it's a business model that works really well and can do wondrous things once it's at scale and you have tons of customers. But the use cases at a smaller scale were more difficult to articulate the value. and I just kind of like waved a magic wand when I would talk about how we get to that place of where we have millions of customers. The examples I would give of how the point would be valuable would be things like, if we can raise $10 billion, we can enclose Chicago in a dome and protect ourselves from the winter.
We found a different solution for that problem out here. But
yeah. So that was a real problem. And actually, Groupon is a great example of a company that has the opposite set of circumstances, which is it works extraordinarily well at small scale. And as it gets larger, you have to find ways to innovate to make it work at a larger scale. You can't send all 3 million of our Chicago subscribers to one business. Right. You'll completely overload that business. So we've had to invent personalization and different types of things in order to make the business operate better at scale, but it works phenomenally well at a small scale, which is also why we ran into so many competitors early on.
Yeah. So the learnings then, as you moved from the point where, first of all, if it takes 5 minutes to explain, maybe that's an early indication that the model, you might have trouble moving forward to something big. And the chicken and egg issues that are present in a lot of startups. I mean, a lot of startups. If you close your eyes to that early, you might be missing it, because you really do have to find a way to power up and to get to scale. Yeah. Then you moved to Groupon, and what were some of the early embellishments? You alluded to a few. I mean, as was mentioned during the introduction, you started with the pizza place on the first floor the first day. But what sort of embellishments did you find as you started to build out the business? What sort of things became important operationally? We'll talk about culture in a little bit, because that's really important. But just as you were scaling the business, what were some things that you wish you would have done quicker, you wish you would have thought about more? What was the learning in that part of it that might be helpful?
So let me see. So some of the one thing that's going on right now, we have a number of little startups kind of operating within Groupon now in different spaces. And I was spending some time earlier this week with one of the teams working on a new initiative that we have. And they're frustrated and yelling at each other on different things and feel like they're not moving fast enough. And at some moment, I reminded myself, this is exactly what it was like at the beginning of Groupon. You know, it wasn't like we had just discovered electricity and everybody was sitting around jumping for joy. It was even early on, it was a constant state of paranoia, thinking that we were going to fail. Every single deal that we ran in the very early days was a massive debate. We'd just be swearing at each other. And I mean, looking back, it's I do think it's important that you care about those details, especially early on, because you're in the process of establishing your values, whether you articulate them or not, what you care about as a company, and so it's important to go through that process early on. You know, things we could have. I'm happy with how we started the business and how we scaled. We moved very fast. We held true to the things that we cared about, that we think make Groupon special. Excellent customer service, having a voice, the way that we write about the deals that we feel is credible and trustworthy with our customers. So there were a lot of opportunities to compromise on those things along the way, and we held true to them, and I think it's put us in a better state for the long term.
Yeah, and when you think of some of the cultural things as the company's grown, as you said, in the early days, you know, every deal you were offering was a great matter of debate in the company. It got top management attention. You had a high bar.
Well, top management, I mean, there were 10 of us.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Well, that was top, middle, and bottom, everyone in a room. So, but now, so you have thousands of people, and cultures shift as places get bigger, or they can shift. How do you try to maintain culture, and how, the company's not that old. I mean, the company's 3 or 4 years old. It hasn't been around for that long a time, but it's changed so much, grown so much. What are the things you do as a leader to try to maintain culture and keep the things that powered you to success initially, keep those just in the culture of the company as you go forward?
Well, I had never worked at a large company before starting
Right.
Groupon, and sometimes I wish that I had, because you could see once you're operating at scale what some of the failure modes are. And when I started Groupon, I remember the few companies I'd worked on, things like values, corporate values, were these platitudes that were plastered on the walls, and it never seemed to have any purpose. But there are some companies that really put a lot of attention into their values, and when you do, it pays off enormously. Not so much when you're a small enough company that you're touching every employee every day or every week, but once you get larger, you need a framework for pushing decision making down the organization, and that's what values, I think, do. It's a set of rules. Even if they're simple things like being customer focused or being long-term oriented, they help people further down in the organization make the same decision that the CEO would make on a lot of those edge cases, which come up constantly. So I think defining what your values are and not just putting them on the wall, but talking about them all the time, living them all the time, is a great investment once you get to a size that you're not touching your employees every single day.
And what can you physically do if you're the CEO of an enterprise? You're in 4 or 5 different cities. You have a lot of people, thousands of people. What can you physically do?
We're in 48 countries.
Exactly. Although personnel-wise, some of those countries, it's not like you have a ton of people there, but since they're local deals and you need copywriters and people to push them out every day. How do you maintain that? You have these important values, and they're not just platitudes. They're the way we really run the business every day. That's what you're saying. You got to be genuine to them. But what can you physically do? I mean, every Friday afternoon out here, companies have company gatherings. They have different meetings, different social events. What are the techniques? Because these men and women are going to go out and run companies too. What do you do physically to maintain that culture and keep the torch?
So we do regular town halls where people can hear from me or other people in senior management and ask questions. We try to be as accessible as possible. It can't fall entirely on the CEO or the CEO's direct reports to give employees transparency and context. So we try to get together with the senior 200 or so people at least once a month to give a business update, to go deeper on some strategic initiatives or certain parts of the business, so that there's a large group of people who know everything that I know and are empowered to be able to give context to all of their employees. And actually, being public has forced us to become very, very good at that. And it's forced us to, I don't know that we're great at it yet, but we're certainly investing a lot of energy in it. And I think it's one of the ways that being public has actually helped to improve our culture and give us a resiliency and long-term sustainability, because as you get external noise, you have to have internal mechanisms to make sure that everybody understands the long-term strategy of the business.
Yeah, so you and your top team have to permeate through the whole company, kind of a holistic view of what the company's about, what its values are, how you do things. And if employees have a holistic view like that, they're going to get the culture, and they're going to, when you get all this external noise in the atmosphere, they're going to be able to separate the signal to noise ratio in a good sort of way. That's what you're.
That's the hope. Yeah.
I think that makes good sense. Let's talk about culture, and all of these questions I'm asking are all from the view from the top folks, solicited student questions. So just I've changed the order a little bit and moved them around. And we're going to be in this mode, I should mention, till about 20 of, but certainly by quarter of, we'll be open mic with the whole audience. But since we have a good group of questions, I'm just going to push on with these a little bit. A number of people asked about the importance of culture. And, all the CEOs who come here and view from the top, they're culture, our place. I mean, you can imagine. You're a little irreverent. You know how that goes.
I think, by the way, my reputation for irreverence is slightly overstated. It's weird. I don't know what advice to give people, but so that intro that I got was very nice. Maybe like 80% of it is actually true. There are things that have happened. Like at one time, a former employer, just to screw with me, told an interviewer that I was a massive Billy Joel fan, and I'd played in a Billy Joel band and stuff like that, which I did like for 2 seconds. That is for irony, but. Anyway, now I have people who come up to me and like quote, "She's always a woman" or something like, "Yeah, man, that's an awesome song." And now I have to live that, and I don't know how to respond, and I usually don't have the forum or time to refute it, or it doesn't seem to matter. So, anyway, sorry, keep going.
No, that's good. So culture, we have courses here at the school that include the importance of culture and just techniques for trying to establish culture. But what, some of the faculty here say, listen, you get the culture right in the company, and culture is going to trump operating realities any day of the week. You get your employees who understand your culture, understand what's important to the management, the stakeholders of the business, and if they're reasonably smart, the operating things will take care of themselves if the culture is right. Culture is that powerful. At the same time, some CEOs are much more operating oriented, and culture is a lip service kind of piece of it. You're early in your career, you've never worked for a lot of big companies, but do you have a sense of that at Groupon? How important is culture?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I fall into the former category, and it's become more, that feeling's become more punctuated as the company's grown. And I mean, again, culture is a way to scale the behaviors that you want to see out of your people. I mean, I think if you're in a space like we are, where there's an enormous opportunity, I mean, we're trying to plug local commerce into the internet, one of the last major spaces that isn't really plugged into the internet. So you have to have a greenfield opportunity like that. Culture will attract great people. Great people will improve the culture, and you get a virtuous cycle. But that eventually allows you to execute and perform and create strong growth and value for your shareholders.
Yeah. Talking about attracting great people, let's, from the MBA's point of view, they have a lot of options when they get out of here. They have a lot of options for their summer, usually if they're first-year MBAs. And increasingly, last year, somewhere around 15 or 16% of our MBA 2s went out and immediately started businesses of their own from Stanford. They didn't go to work for a startup. They were the startup. They started something either by themselves or as part of a small team. And yet a number of students also went to work for Groupon or organizations like Groupon that were, not old companies, 3 or 4 years old, but more established, and a place maybe where they could learn a little bit about successful entrepreneurial activities before undertaking one of their own. What do you think, or how should our students be thinking about that? Why should someone not do a startup right away and go to work at a place like Groupon?
Well, it depends on what experience they had before they got their MBA. But I can tell you, I would have loved to have worked at a place like Groupon before I started Groupon. And the reason is it's a really helpful experience in starting your company to have been at a larger business, so that you can anticipate some of the potential pitfalls that you'll run into, or what a company looks like once it starts to scale. Most of what I've learned about being in a larger company, I've learned from my team, many of whom have come from larger companies. We have, I'll give you one example of a
Sure.
role at Groupon that's attracted a lot of MBAs. Our city manager position, which is you come in and you run Chicago, or you run the daily deal business for New York or something like that. And Groupon is unusual in the world of technology companies because we're this cyborg that's a combination of technology and also humans. We have a lot of people calling merchants and doing manual processes. And that type of experience is invaluable leadership training. It's a daily street fight, going out there and closing these and signing up merchants. I sometimes say at a company like Google or Facebook, everybody could go home for 6 months or so, and the service would keep on running. At Groupon, people could go home for 5 days and we'd have to shut down. Like, we just have to put up a close sign because that's about how much lead time we have of merchants that are actually scheduled to run on the site. So it's intense, it's very operational. You learn how to lead people, you learn how to work with technologists, and it's a great leadership training ground for people who are looking to go on and run something themselves.
Yeah, and they can effectively learn on your nickel, not their own. They get smarter, raise their odds of success because they've kind of been there, done that, and as well as a lot of our students come here without vast amounts of operating experience. And the city manager job, where it's like you said, you don't come to work for one day, and it's clear there's going to be a big problem. A lot of our students, 30–40% of our students come from a consulting role or investment banking role, where it's had high intellectual content, but not the operating content. That's a key part of every startup.
Yeah, and it's a key part of many startups. It's not as there are some startups that have their magical revenue-generating machine where operational excellence sometimes isn't as important.
Good point. Yes, absolutely.
And the interesting thing is the people from technology companies that have come to Groupon that tend to succeed are people that come from companies like Amazon. It's e-commerce in nature, but it's also just much more operational than other pure technology plays where it's harder to get used to living in that high urgency, high intensity operational excellence environment.
Yeah. So you've talked a bit about the start of the company, how you pivoted ideas, how you've kept culture, how you've tried to continually innovate as you built the company. Let's talk a little more about the future and what a number of students were interested in hearing. Over the long term, what sort of white space you thought was still left in adjacencies? How, there's been a lot of conversation about Groupon goods or Groupon services or, things other than just daily deal focused, but more ongoing commerce. You have a lot of relationships with a lot of customers. You have a huge sales force, a lot of copywriters who write this stuff up. What else can you do with that? What are the white spaces left? What does the future look like?
So our strategy has had two components to it: to go wider in daily deals by entering new categories like travel, goods, and so on. And that's pretty straightforward. It's really doing the same thing that we've done with with local services and doing it for products and other things. And that continues to go well. Groupon Goods now is a big part of our business, and our customers love it. It's fun to get these emails with a really eclectic mix of products, anything from cat food to a mattress to a camcorder. So it's a fun extension of what we're doing with local daily deals. But our real core is always going to be in local. It's where we've built these strategic assets, our direct relationships with millions of merchants and millions of customers. So at the same time as we're going wider, we're going deeper into local. And what we see as our real opportunity is to build the world's first local e-commerce marketplace. We call it our building the operating system for local commerce, which is referring to kind of the technology infrastructure that you need to plug merchants into the internet and create a real marketplace similar to how Amazon is a marketplace for products. We want to do that for local. And you'll see us move more and more in that direction. We've been experimenting with it with things like Groupon Now, which is a real-time deals on demand service where you can pull deals instead of having them pushed to you through email. And we think we're really focused on building our selection of deals and making our deals easily findable, so that whenever a customer is looking to do something, that journey starts with Groupon. And if we can do that, we think there's so much opportunity both for customers and for merchants in creating a better way for customers to discover businesses and save money, and for merchants to get more customers in the door, as well as have tools to better run their business. And the transition to mobile is really what's enabling a shift like this, because you couldn't do some of the things that we intend to do without people having the internet with them at all times.
Yeah, that sounds pretty well conceived. I mean, a lot of people have written about Groupon, that it's been almost the savior of the local merchant. I mean, if you're a local merchant and you're competing with the likes of Amazon and other established, huge budget, digitally omnipresent sort of competitors, and you're some little local merchant, the fact that there's Groupon and similar services available starts to level the playing field. So other things.
But I read an article about.
Do you buy any of that?
About this business that ran a Groupon and they sold 100,000 cupcakes and it almost put them out of business. I don't know about that.
High class problem.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Our merchants have never had a great way to reach customers. The best thing they had was television advertising or newspaper advertising or the Yellow Pages or something like that. And for the first time, they have a way to get hundreds or thousands of customers in the door. In fact, for the first time, they're dealing with the problem of, if there's any problem with Groupon, it's what do I do when I have too many customers instead of too few?
Example.
Yeah, exactly. And we see it in our results. We use third parties to do surveys of our merchant satisfaction. We find that our businesses, our partners have the highest satisfaction rates out of anyone that these companies survey that offer B2B services.
Yeah, and so there's social good in that. I mean, most people think the world's a better place because there's local merchants, and if you're a vehicle to help those local merchants prosper in an increasingly digitally competitive world, a lot of people see real social value in that. And not that Groupon has a huge social mission. I mean, it has a business mission. But what's important to our students often is the social component of what they do. And are there other social, redeeming social aspects that you see, or what is the management of Groupon involved with of social nature? Because that's, it's been a huge pendulum swing in the 20 years I've been here, where students, that's really important now. It's important to the world, and it's important to our students. I don't know if you ever think about that.
You know, one of the most interesting learnings that I've had personally is when I started The Point, I mean, it's a much more directly in the service of social good. It was about power to the people, right? And Groupon, I think, just the model has and will do more good for the world than even The Point would have had it been successful, but in smaller ways. I mean, I feel this every time I listen in on customer service calls in the company, and you hear about the 70-year-old lady that got spider vein removal who never could have afforded it at full price, and it's like, that's great. That's going to make her life a lot better. Or the couple that got married using a Groupon for a hot air balloon. Yeah. And we're making all these experiences accessible for millions and millions of people who wouldn't have been able to do these things otherwise, and that feels awesome. Like, we're allowing people to live more full lives, and there are a number of businesses that we've helped start or expand that never could have done it if they didn't have a vehicle to reach customers at scale as quickly as they have with Groupon. We do other stuff. We have something called Groupon Grassroots. We've raised over $1 million where we run basically Groupon campaigns to help local businesses raise money from our community. And we kind of take our community and channel it back into local causes. So that's more directly philanthropic stuff that we're doing.
That's great. Let's use the last few minutes we have before we throw it open to everyone to talk about life as a public company. Obviously, you had a lot of ability to raise money even when you were a private company. I mean, you raised almost, $800–900 million from all sorts of people. And then you made the decision to go public, raised additional $600 or $700 million at the time of the public offering. What's it like operating a public company, and how do you keep the culture we talked about, the innovation we talked about, the getting people to push each other hard on ideas, all the things that were so important in the first couple of years? How do you maintain that when you got all this sideshow going on around you of being a public company?
It's a whole new set of challenges, and it's fun in a way when you not that I'd wish it on anybody, but as a leader, as a person, you learn an enormous amount during times like this. And I mean, that's another cool thing about working at a company like Groupon. Anyone can run a company that's going through hypergrowth. But this is where, it's times like this where you're defined as a leader, and where you really learn what it takes. So I think that's been, even though it's been challenging, that's been something that everybody has valued, and the external pressure has forced us to identify areas where we can get better, and we have gotten a lot better as a result, I think, of being a public company. It's a mixed bag. There's no question about it, but at the end of the day, no regrets.
And how do you power through that personally? I mean, one week they don't like your accounting, the next week they don't like your recurring revenue, the next week they don't like your marketing costs, who knows? All this stuff flying around. How do you, I mean, you're the leader. You're the one that these thousands of employees are looking to. How do you power through that personally?
Well, you just have to learn to look internally for signs of success and not look at people outside where there's a long history of people misunderstanding things that went on to be hugely successful, or people that went on to be hugely successful. So we try to remind our people internally of the real facts about the business. We're growing 45% year over year. We have massive mobile penetration. A third of our transactions in the United States are happening on mobile devices, which makes us one of the largest mobile commerce companies as a percentage of transactions. We've diversified into having a second major business line in Groupon Goods, and we're the largest player in a nascent local commerce market with nothing but opportunity. So the good thing about our space is it's so open, and the opportunity is so full ahead of us that we can afford to have some screw ups along the way, and still succeed massively as long as we stay focused and everybody understands how we get there.
Yeah. So while the microphone people get ready and people get their questions in mind, let me just ask one last question here, which is, running the company now, what's most important to you? I mean, what is, you're a CEO, you got a million things on your plate, but what's most important to you, both personally and professionally, as you get up every morning, as you go to work? What's the key thing?
People. I mean, it's making sure that our people understand the strategy, that we continue to attract great people, and we've been very lucky there. Some of our strongest people we've hired recently. Hired a new SVP of global sales and operations named Cal Raman, who's a great asset for the company, and several others. So what keeps me going is knowing that some of the people that we've added recently are some of the strongest people in the company, which is a great sign.
Yeah, as you said, some operating models, they have kind of a secret formula or something. The company almost runs itself. Your company, very day-to-day operational, you're as good as your last deal, kind of, and so having great men and women who can be part of that, I can see where that's important. Let's go. We have a full 15 minutes, 16, 17 minutes. We're right on schedule. Let's, over here on the right, yeah.
Thank you very much for the talk. I think one question that is relevant or kind of top of mind for a lot of the students here is just stock price, given especially what's happened with Facebook recently, and your stock being, I think, 85% off the 52-week high. How much do you think about that, or how important is that to the operating model or your vision on a day-to-day basis, or do you think about this on kind of a 5 or 10-year horizon?
Well, it creates a lot of noise, and it creates a lot of potential distraction. We would rather it not be that way, given the choice. Obviously, but our decisions are based on where we're going to be 3 to 5 years from now, not what we can do to get the stock price up tomorrow or the next day. It's times like this that define companies' cultures, and you can't really call yourself a long-term oriented company until you're in a situation like this, and we're really trying to live by what we say.
Yeah. Over here at the side. Yeah, just let her run down there with the microphone. Oops, sorry. You're next.
So I'm just kind of thinking about my hometown in the Chicago area, and kind of curious your perspective of starting a business out there. What were some of the advantages and disadvantages? For instance, was it more difficult to find engineering talent? Did you ever think of moving the business out here?
What's your hometown?
The Schaumburg area, northwest suburbs.
So you would actually start a business in Schaumburg or in downtown?
Well, no, I'm just curious in general, just the Chicago area. Yeah.
There are trade-offs. So it would have been hard to start a business like Groupon out here because it's so operational. We have 3,000 people doing things other than engineering in the United States. So Chicago ended up being a great home for a business like Groupon. No, we've ended up opening an engineering office out here, and in the U.S., about half of our engineers are here, half are in Chicago. Great engineers in Chicago. You don't have the depth of experience a lot of times. You're lucky if you find somebody who's worked at Sears.com in Chicago, and that means that a lot of people's first real tech startup experience is working at Groupon, and we've brought some engineers over from Palo Alto who have more experience working in a company at scale in order to balance it out. But there are definitely trade-offs, and it's hard to find engineers anywhere. There's no silver bullet that I know of, but it's a great place to do a startup. I'd recommend it.
Good.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about your competition. So a lot of other companies have come into this space since you started, and it seems like you have an advantage with your large sales force, but how do you plan to keep that advantage, and how do you plan to fend off the competition in the future, and how do you view those other companies?
So there's two groups of competitors that we think about. There's the people that took the daily deal, local daily deal model that we pioneered and have just cloned it, and then there are people who are going after the larger local commerce opportunity. In the first group, we feel really good about where we are. We have a market leadership position in most of our countries, and it seems to be fairly stable in those countries. So it's an easy business to get into, a very difficult business to scale. We've seen that as many of the direct clones have dropped out or reduced in scope. The second category are the other businesses that see the opportunity to enhance the way that we buy things locally using technology. And there's a lot of people coming at that from different angles. And that's why, even as we continue to refine our core business, we are investing in innovative new products. We recently launched a payments product, for example, for our kind of Main Street business partners that's designed for the restaurants, spas, and salons that work with Groupon. Great rates, very simple to use, and sign up for, and a great value add for the merchants that are running with Groupon. And we'll continue to do things like that that are more innovative in order to make sure that somebody doesn't come up from behind and take the opportunity from a different angle.
Yes, Peter.
You talked about the clones, and you have done some acquisitions. How would you usually approach something like this? Like, how would you evaluate which clone to buy? And also, coming from Germany, I've kind of followed the City Deal acquisition. How did the culture change after acquisitions like this?
So, great question. The way that we evaluated the acquisitions was based on the people, and this, especially because our strategy early on was to spread across as many geographies as we can so that we can capture first mover advantage and gain market share. So we really needed to rely on strong leaders who could operate semi-autonomously without very close management or people in the U.S. being overseas all the time. And that was the only way we'd be able to scale. So it's really about getting those leaders and strong people. We, again, early on, were optimizing for speed and gaining market share. Only recently have we started the process of integrating the culture. And what I've found is that everybody is hungry for that in the company. Everybody is looking for ways to not just culturally, but in terms of the technologies that we've built, move to a unified approach. And there are challenges for sure, but you have to. There are things that you work through and very specific as they come up.
So first, I want to say you're awesome, and you've accomplished something that probably no one else.
Are you going to say something really mean to me?
Yeah, not really mean, but challenging. So I mean, when you were talking, the perception on both the customer side and the merchant side, I feel like there was a gap between what you were talking about and what sort of my anecdotal experience has been. So like on the customer side, I feel like everyone hates daily deals because they just flood the inbox, and it's not just you guys, but it's lots of these competitors. And then on the merchant side, I've heard of several kind of anecdotal merchant stories where they
right.
never
That's
really
what I was trying to do when I made my kind of failed joke about the cupcake thing.
Yeah, and so you said you commissioned this internal study and merchant.
We did it with a company called 4C, who's the company that a lot of people quote when they talk about customer satisfaction. And we have, we've talked about them ad nauseum, but we have among the highest scores both on the customer and the merchants, in the merchant side.
Yeah, so I guess just
the problem is
with the perception
you are
gap.
not our typical customer. And especially in Palo Alto, we suck in Palo Alto. We have very few deals here. And I think there's a larger than normal disconnect between the geeks and the tech press and the people who are our customers. And that's part of what leads to the difference. Like, I bet your mom loves Groupon.
Not sure if that's true of my mom. And okay, we'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, over here.
Andrew, I'd like to ask you about China. It's been pretty well documented that Groupon burned millions of dollars, firing thousands of employees, causing what some people call a riot. And ultimately leading to a few months ago, Groupon exiting the market by selling it to Tencent, who you guys joint ventured with, was one competitor, i.e. Google, saying that Groupon was, quote, getting it up in the ass. We've just been studying a lot about China recently as part of our curriculum, so I'd be first interested in your insight.
Do you think it's okay, if you just say quote, it's okay to say stuff like that?
Touche.
Well, judging by the laughter, I obviously got away with it. So interesting, first your insight in what was Groupon's thinking when you guys approached a market like China, and will you guys ever re-enter the market there?
So China, if you plant the seed of an idea, what we found is if you plant the seed of an idea in every country, it's generally going to bloom into the same flower. But I think the flower looks very different in China. It's by far the most different market that we operated in. I can give a number of examples. I mean, part of it was people, the first time I think that we got some exposure was when we did our round of funding with Excel. And at that point, there were something like 1,000, like maybe 6 months later, there were something like 1,000 different direct clones that started. So as a result, no one built a brand that customers trusted. They all ended up commoditizing each other. You had businesses that were pure sales forces and other businesses that were pure consumer marketplaces, and the sales forces were selling to all the different consumer marketplaces. The way Chinese consumers use the internet, there wasn't a lot of traffic coming from email, which is our main driver of transactions in the rest of our countries. It was very small in China. So very different market. And required really a completely different strategy and a different type of patience. I think where we messed up there is we had this model that worked everywhere else of getting into a market, following our playbook, scaling very quickly, and the playbook just didn't work there. And it didn't work for anyone, really. I mean, it's a very fragmented market. There's no clear market leader, and we felt like we would be better off partnering with somebody else, which is why we took the actions that we took. But we're still in China as investors, and we're very, very interested in the market and how it'll develop over the long term. But a lot of lessons learned.
A few more questions? Yeah, some here in the front.
I'll stand. So I'm just curious to hear a little bit more about what your thought process was when Google offered to acquire you, and kind of why you elected against that decision, and now looking back on it, what you think about it.
That's been written about the rumors that we had acquisition offers. I can't address them directly. I can tell you that we made a decision to continue being to be an independent company because we saw huge opportunity, and we wanted the opportunity to pursue it unencumbered by the possibility of somebody else controlling our destiny or decisions. And we ultimately thought we could create more value for our shareholders that way as well. And we continue to believe all those things. And it takes more than a bumpy entrance as a public company for us to change our mind on something like that.
Yeah, a few more questions down here.
So I'm interested in a little bit more about your strategy with your primary customers, which I guess are your merchants or one of your critical customer bases. And Misha mentioned a few minutes ago, sort of the relationship you have. But you mentioned the cupcakes and how merchants can get a little bit overwhelmed at times. Do you do anything to help them prepare for the onrush of potential customers, and in doing so, create the opportunity to work with them multiple times in the future because they don't get crushed by this onslaught?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely do. It's in our interest to make sure that merchants don't get crushed, so they will want to continue to work with us. We find it's simple things. It's the amount of time merchants have between when their deal is scheduled and when it actually runs. If it's just 1 or 2 days, then they're far less likely to be satisfied than if we give them a week. So those are the kinds of processes in place. We moved about a year or so ago to a structure where instead of just having salespeople, we have account managers that have a long-term relationship with the merchant. They talk to the merchant before they run their deal and prep them, help them think about answering phone calls and making sure that they're in stock on anything that they might be selling once their deal runs. We also have changed the types of deals that we offer. So for merchants one thing that we run into is merchants who say, I love my Groupon experience, but man, it was operationally, or I love the customers, but it was operationally stressful, and I just need a breather. I need to relax before I do something like that again. And so now we offer a service for merchants that we just call internally Groupon Lite. And it's a subscription model where they can run little mini deals where we sell up to 100 units a month or 50 units a month or something like that. So instead of getting this massive one-time influx of customers, it's partitioned across a longer period of time. So, you know, we monitor our merchant satisfaction very closely. We understand what the inputs are to the percentage of merchants that are dissatisfied. You know, the negative stories get a lot of coverage because they're super interesting, right? And they're like, I mean, when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong a lot of times. There's no form of advertising that's going to have 100% merchant satisfaction. We'll strive for it, but we'll never get there. But I think the negative stories taint Groupon sometimes because when you ask questions like that, in the same way that every time people fly, they think that it's going to crash and they're going to die, or they think about mercury in tuna fish. It's become one of these kind of urban legends because all the data that we have just doesn't back it up.
As we approach the 1 o'clock hour, we'd like to, first of all, thank all of you for your questions. Secondly, thank the student leaders of View from the Top who put this together. I think we have one more presentation left. And lastly, we'd of course like to thank Andrew and recognize you've really built an industry leader, and you're 31 years old. So look forward to a lot more.